So, hello and welcome to this latest episode of Interesting Lives of Ordinary People. Now, if you're one of my regulars and you've been here before, you know what this conversation is about. It's a free-flowing conversation with guests who I think are interesting, and I'm pretty certain that those of you who know them will agree with me. But if you're here for the first time, then really this conversation is to tease out aspects of my guests' lives and what their turning points were and what it is that they do today that really, I suppose, makes them come alive. And I'm so happy to introduce my guest today, who's Nayanika Mahtani. Nayanika and I have known each other for a really long time. I won't even say how many years. And I'll give you a very sort of brief introduction to Nayanika, but there's so much to her that you're going to find out in the course of this conversation. So Nayanika used to be an investment banker in the old days. And from there, she's moved into much more of a creative space where she's a best-selling author. She's won critical acclaim for her books, as well as more recently, she's been doing some co-writing for movies and screenplays. And the two films that she's done that, again, have been well received are Shakuntala Devi and more recently, Main Vaapas Aaunga. And the themes behind her books and her stories very much sort of delve into historical fiction, multi-generational sagas, which, she's drawing on her own family story for that. But also, I think I love the way she says the quiet human connection. It's something that we need so much in this world today. So with that, Nanika, welcome. So good to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Rohini. Always so lovely to chat with you, and thank you for that beautiful introduction.
And Nanika and I are both in London, but as is always the case, we hardly ever meet. I think the only time we've met is when we've had people from overseas coming and there's been a reason to meet. So this is great. At least we're meeting on Zoom. So thank you. Now, Nanika, I want to first of all, before we dive into your turning point, I want to just ask you about this film that's taking India and the Indian diaspora by storm, Main Vaapas Aaunga. You've co-written the story and the screenplay with the well-known filmmaker Imtiaz Ali. Tell us a little bit about it, and then I want to sort of move backwards into your turning points and stories. How did that come about?
So, I totally believe very truly that stories choose us. They choose their tellers, they choose their timings. This film is rooted in the partition. And I believe it stemmed from an unfinished conversation with my grandfather, as did my last novel, which was also rooted in the partition, which was called Across the Line, and that's published by Penguin. Um, this was my sort of tribute, as I see it, to my grandparents who were refugees in the partition of 1947, and also to that whole generation, which was about 14 million refugees. And it came about, I think, because of I sometimes feel my late father arranges things for me. And this was, I was in Dehradun for a literature festival. And I was called there to talk about my book, Across the Line. And while I was there, they asked me, would you mind sort of moderating a conversation between a well known Indian author called Ruskin Bond
Mm.
and Imtiaz Ali, who is a very well acclaimed filmmaker, and I love both their work. And I was really happy, to do it. Just as things happened, Ruskin, who's now in his 90s, he was in his late 80s then, he fell ill and he couldn't make the trip to Missouri from Dehradun.
Mm.
Sorry, to Dehradun from Missouri.
Mm.
And so they requested us to go up to Missouri and record our conversation there because, the literature festival had sold out for that session and they couldn't have a no show.
Yeah.
So we went up to meet him in Missouri. And on that car journey, Imtiaz was just asking me about what I do and what I write, and I gave him a copy of Across the Line. And I remember in that conversation, we had just come out of COVID, and I was really questioning my purpose in life. I was really thinking about a lot of things that maybe I wouldn't have had COVID not happened.
Mhm.
And I remember telling him that I'm not even sure that I want to write anymore. I mean, what difference does it make if I write or not? I mean, there's so much more to discovering why we are here. Um, this doesn't seem to me like something that should take up my time. And he just smiled in that very Sufi way of his. He's, if you know him and his work, it's got a very lyrical Sufi quality to it. Um, and after our session with Ruskin, and incidentally, Ruskin and my father were friends from boyhood. I didn't know that. I mean, my
Oh,
father would mention it that he was a character in one of Ruskin's most well-loved books, called The Room on the Roof, and he's the character of Suri in that. And he would tell me, these stories, and I would never believe him because my
and
dad.
Sumi, of course, is your maiden name, isn't it?
Yes.
Right. Yes. Yes.
Yes, that's right. And
Yes.
he would say, and there's a character called Suri in Room on the Roof, and my dad would always say that Ruskin, Bond has named his character after me, but he would equally in the same breath say that the Sher Shah Suri Marg was also named after him. So I never knew what to believe and what not to. So
Mhm.
through his life, I never believed him. But at a meeting with Ruskin, I realized that he actually was friends with my dad, and they both
Yeah.
had grown up in Dehradun, and he was Suri in Room on the Roof. And I wish I'd had the chance to tell him that I'm sorry for not believing you, but that didn't happen. But in any case, so we had that meeting, that session happened. It was a very beautiful session. You know how some sessions just flow, and
Mm.
a very sort of meaningful session I felt. And we came back, and Imtiaz said, I think there is something we could work on together. So the next time you're in Bombay, call me. And I came back to London and started my life, my Sainsbury's life again. And that conversation was forgotten. But when I went to Bombay the next time, I called him and we met up, and he told me about. I mean, I had given him some ideas. Actually, I'd emailed him a few ideas about things that I could write about. One included a film regarding Ruskin Bond's stories. And he loved my writing, he said, but he said it wasn't going to find the audience. It was too niche. We wouldn't get a producer. So when we met, he said, you know what? I like the way you write, but can you give me 20 or 30 pages about this idea of mine? And he told me the sort of seed for what became Main Vaapas Aaunga. And I then expanded it into 20 to 30 pages, sent it to him, and he wrote back. And I still remember that email where he said, there is a meeting of minds, and now we will roll ahead. And for me to work with, somebody whose work I have so loved, it was literally like even beyond my dreams. I can't even say the dream come true because I hadn't even dreamt it. So
Mm.
it was literally like my dad had arranged for a partition story to be directed by somebody who I knew would tell it with the right lens, without making it a blame game, without making it anything agenda driven, just a human story about. And the protagonist is not the partition, the protagonist is an old man who was a young man at the time that this happened, and just a boy in love, a very ordinary boy, nothing spectacular about him, but just the human cost of divisive conflict that
Yeah.
continues, that still festers like a wound. And that happened with my grandparents. My maternal grandmother actually came from the place where our movie is based, Sargoda.
Mm.
It's her ancestral home. And she had already been married by the time it was before partition. So she was already married to my Nana, who was in a government job, and he lived in New Delhi. And the rest of her family didn't move when the riots broke out. They said, we'll die here, but we're not moving. We're not leaving our home. And their
Yeah.
lives were saved by their Muslim neighbors. And till today, they live there as Hindus.
Wow.
So I had never been to Sargoda, but this was my journey back home. This was my journey to my grandmother's village. This was my journey to where my father was born, where my grandparents, all of them were born. And this is the closest I ever came to going there through my book and then through the film.
Such an amazing story. And I think what I love about that is how these disparate events kind of almost conspired to put you on this path. It's almost like
Absolutely.
maybe if you'd done the conversation in the festival, maybe it wouldn't have been as intimate. I don't know. I haven't heard that particular interview. I don't know if it's available for people who weren't at the
It
lit.
is actually, it's on YouTube. It's on YouTube. So it's, if you just Google Dehradun Literature Festival, Ruskin Bond, Imtiaz Ali, Nayanika, I think it'll come up. And I think you're right. Things happen when they're meant to happen.
Because you had the long journey together,
We
which
had the, yeah, we had the journey where, otherwise it's just you dip in and dip out and
yeah,
you go back to your lives. And I think that journey was just, I mean, we were in this car where we had to make conversation. It wasn't like,
yeah,
we were being very rude not to.
that's,
So, and in that conversation, there were things that I wouldn't otherwise perhaps have said. And, even that thing about my purpose, Rohini, I really feel like my purpose was, and now I don't know if I need to do anything else. I feel like I've done what I came to this life for. I
yeah,
came to finish that conversation. I came to honor my grandparents and that generation. I came to pay tribute, and I feel I've done that. And now I feel like, everything else is a bonus.
yes.
I've done what I came to do.
And it goes back to that thing you said about the quiet human connection, and it feels like you found that connection on that journey with Imtiaz Ali ji, and then of course the conversation you had when you went back to Bombay. So I have a sort of a small question. So obviously your books are in English, but your screenplay has been in Hindi.
The
So,
screenplay is written in English. So it's very
oh,
funny. The way it works is, so
yes,
all screenwriters, most of them use a Hollywood software called Final Draft.
right.
And we write in English. So Bollywood is very different in the sense that there are three aspects to screenwriting: there's story, screenplay, and dialogues. So the only thing that's in Hindi or whichever regional language you're making the film in will be the dialogues. And the rest of it, because it's sort of a document that is an instruction booklet for the whole cast and crew, all of whom needn't know Hindi.
I
So there
see.
could be Bengalis and people from the south and everywhere. So the entire script is in English, and only the dialogues are in Hindi, but even that is written in English, spelling out Hindi,
I
so
see. Oh
yeah,
God, it's so interesting. I never knew that because I
yeah.
was just thinking, how uber talented are you that you can actually not only write beautifully in English, but you could also do it in Hindi. I'm not saying you're any less talented because you didn't do it in Hindi, but that's interesting. I hadn't known that. Now I want to come back to you and what your turning point was, because you were obviously you're from IIM Bangalore and you went into investment banking. I think like a lot of graduates from business school, there's a kind of a playbook and a path that we all think we've got to go down. So I'm assuming that was what that was. So tell us about how was life like for you during that phase of your career? And what made you then turn away from that, or you maybe, decide that you were going to do something completely different?
So I think I nothing happened because I chose to turn away or do anything like that. So when I was in college, I wanted very much to act in musical theater, and I thought I was very talented. I wasn't, but I really believed that, how you are when you're young, you just believe anything can happen. And I thought I would be, singing, and it was very specific musical theater. And I remember, I joined Theatre Action Group, and Shah Rukh Khan was also part of that group. He was senior, and at Delhi University as well, where I was doing college. And I remember going to my parents and telling them this, and my dad sat me down and he said, um, this is all very well, but how are you going to put food on your table? So why don't you get a job and then you do this on the side? It's lovely, but do it on the side. And so then I took the CAT and did the IIM thing and all of that, and joined the bank, and all that happened, and met you at IIM, Rohini.
Yes.
And yes, so I mean, I don't have any regrets. Looking back, do I wish that I had straight off the bat gone down the theater route? No. I think what that gave me was a scaffolding, and the courage to take risks. And
Mm.
I think it prepared me. Also, I arrived at a stage and age in life where I was not afraid of failing. I had, and then not doing what I wanted to do was more scary than doing it. So,
Can you
sometimes
say that again? So that was very profound, but I need you to say it again.
so
So,
it was like maybe not doing something that I wasn't sure I would succeed at was more scary than doing it. So the regret of, oh my God, I only have this many years left now.
yes,
I need to do it.
yes.
And even if I fail spectacularly, it's better than not having tried. So that came to me with age. So I don't think I think I would have been scared to do that earlier in my life, maybe.
Mm.
So I think it came at a time when I was ready to face it. And, in my kind of work now, uh, as compared to investment banking, everything is very much in the public gaze.
Mm.
Whatever I do, like if I'm terrible at my job in a bank, my boss would know, maybe my colleagues would know, a client would know, and I would know. But here, everybody is judging that thing I put out.
Yes,
And everybody is very easily writing in with an opinion,
yes,
writing on very social platforms, very, what do I say, very easily accessible social media platforms that everybody can read. So you
yes,
fail quite spectacularly if you
yeah.
fail. So it needs a little bit of a tough, hard exterior to be able to step into that and say, no matter what, even though I've never studied this, I have no experience. I'm the oldest person in the room and the newest. And in most rooms, I was the oldest and the newest at it. But I just knew I needed to do it. And it made no logical sense. I was leaving a really cushy job. I was, sort of not even certain if it would happen, because it's not like somebody's told you, oh, come and we're going to do this together. It's just me knocking at doors
Yeah.
saying, here I am.
And you weren't sort of trying to do this on the side because your father obviously said, you get the job that pays the bills and do this on the side. So were you for a while trying to do that on the side and you decided you needed to commit to this and not, kind of have one foot on two different boats kind of thing?
No, I just completely, it was out of sight, out of mind for me, and I loved my years in the bank as well. And then they kept us so busy, there was no time for anything
True,
else.
that's true.
So it was
Yeah.
just like I just got onto that treadmill and I was going, going, going. And actually, now that you ask about it, what happened was that uh, after I got married, we moved to Africa, and I was working with JP Morgan Chase, I think it was called Chase, JP Morgan Chase at that time in Bombay. And when I moved to Africa, they didn't have a branch there. So I couldn't just, sort of join. So I joined Citibank, I remember. And I used to work in oil and gas with JP Morgan. That was my specialization. And within Citibank, the refinery was at Port Harcourt in Nigeria. And so one of my colleagues at Port Harcourt got shot and he died.
Oh my
And
God.
this was like a really traumatic incident that I just took a step back, and I quit the bank at that time actually, because
Yeah.
it was just too much to handle, and I
Yeah.
thought I needed some time off. And when I was at home, and because we're so used to doing something, waking up every day since you're not used to sitting at home. So just for a lark, I auditioned to write with Sesame Street, New York, and I wanted to write for their outreach program in Africa for children who didn't have access to television in Africa and in India. So I just auditioned, and they sent me a brief, and they said, okay, make a story about this and make a story about that, and make it relevant to the children you're writing for. And I did my bit, and I just sent it, and I got selected. So this was the first validation I got that I somebody thinks I can write.
Yeah.
Because I had never studied literature or writing or creative writing, any of that. But here were these people who were willing to pay me to write. So I started writing for them. And then I realized I really enjoy it. I really enjoy storytelling that I knew. And I started writing for my daughters, and I wrote these stories. And then a friend of mine, I never thought I was good enough to be published, because you know how we always have this imposter syndrome about ourselves, especially as women. And a friend of mine read it, and she said, listen, I'm sending it to my grandma, who knows a lot about stories and things like that. So she sent it to her grandma, who sent it to a Parsi friend of hers who was a literary agent for Penguin. And that's how my book reached Penguin without me knowing. So I get a call from my editor, now editor at Penguin, saying that we really liked the manuscript that was submitted by your agent. I didn't even know that she was representing me. She had just sent it, and they said, can we have a call, and we'd like to discuss this. And that's how my first book happened. So
Amazing.
to just rewind, if I hadn't gone to Africa, and if that incident, very very tragic incident, hadn't happened, which made me take a step back and just for a lark apply it for a job that I would never otherwise have thought of applying for, because I just wouldn't have had the time to do it.
Yes.
you know it's just almost like I cannot take credit for the way things happened. They just were meant to be, is what I say.
Yes. And that was the children's books you wrote in the
Yes. So
beginning,
I
wasn't it?
started with the children's books. And
Yes.
then after, I was always, my whole thing has been trying to impress my children, because they weren't around when I had this fancy job, and they just know me as this l- mummy. So I wanted to tell them that I also had this other life. And
Yes.
so then I started writing for whichever age group they were growing into. I kept writing for that age group. So finally, when my partition novel came, it was a young adult book, because they were young adults by then. But I started when they were 10 and 12. And yeah, so, that was my first book was for that age group.
How sweet. So the theme of partition, and you mentioned obviously, your nanny's family stayed behind in Pakistan. So so does that mean that after partition, she was not able to go back and be with her family? And your other initiative that I didn't talk about was piecing it together, which is such a beautiful initiative. And piecing, has the word piece rather than, pieces of cake or whatever. So it's piecing it together, play on the word. Um, and that was the first time I realized just how deeply um, interested and committed you were to the topic of bringing partition into our consciousness and to actually help people from both sides of the divide to really connect again. So tell us about a little bit about your grandparents' families first, because they were clearly the inspiration for your story. So what happened to your nanny once she sort of got, you know, she was in India and her family were in Pakistan. How was that for her and for you all to
So,
feel? Mm.
I think because of the wars in the beginning, I think there was a war in 1948, and then again. So till 1953, um, there was no way of anyone going to the other side. In 1953, I think they issued the first India Pakistan travel document, which is there in our film as well. And
Mm.
so my Nani's brothers came. She wasn't there when her mother died. She couldn't go. And her brothers came, and I remember I grew up in Kolkata, but we used to come for summer holidays. And I remember that every day, whenever they visited, they had to report to the police station, and every day. And this was for every city that they went to. So you got a visa for a city, and it was vice versa. Whenever she went, it was the same. And I used to think I might, you don't know what's going on. And as a child, you're wondering, what kind of family do I have? And why are we always at the police station?
Mm.
You're just wondering about that. And even for my, so this was my nani, but even my dadi and my dada uh, came from Rawalpindi and Lahore. And
Mm.
the tattoo that is there in the film is uh, is a tattoo that my grandfather, my dada, had on his forearm. And it was
Oh.
a tattoo that he and his best friend from school had run away one day and got each other's names tattooed. And that name, his friend's name was Tarlok, so he got Tarlok written in Urdu, and his friend got his name written. And us cousins used to ask my dada that, what is this? Who is this? I mean, you've got his tattoo and now you don't even meet him. And he used to tell us, Ke kamina hai wo, he doesn't stay in touch. He's,
Mm.
mm, and much later when I was researching for my book, my bua told me that he died. Tarlok died in the partition
Oh
riots.
my goodness.
Yeah,
Oh.
and my grandfather would, maybe he just made up the story for us, or maybe it was his way of coping with,
Yes.
you know. So yeah, so and um, I before I started writing Across the Line, I was actually commissioned to write another book. But every time I sat down to write, I would see a little boy playing pittu in a gully, which I had never seen, and that boy had a tattoo on his forearm. And I feel like it was my grandfather calling me, inviting me to tell his story. And I remember calling my editor and saying to her that, I know after Genghis Khan, that was my last book after Ambushed, and then Genghis Khan, I was supposed to write another historical fiction on one of the Mughal queens. And I remember telling her that, Shohini, every time I sit down to write, I'm getting another story in my head. And she was like, we can't work like this. We've contracted to do something. It's not my decision. We've taken a whole, we have a calendar and a niece. So I requested her. I said, please, can I send you like 3 chapters, and
Mm.
can you go back and ask them if I can do this first and that later? And luckily she managed to convince them, and that became Across the Line.
And I read it and it was beautiful. It was just lovely. And I think it's such a powerful way to revisit stories of our own families. And you mentioned, your grandparents clearly have now passed away. Um, when they were alive, how much were they willing to talk? Because I mean, these must have been traumatic times for them. And a bit like in this film, Main Vaapas Aaunga, there's a reluctance to go there because it was so hurtful and so deep that it's almost like, maybe the feeling is if I open that dam, then I'm just gonna drown in the grief of it. And so there's a lot of, and this is true of any trauma, I'm sure. People don't want to talk about it. How much were your grandparents willing to talk about what happened, and just give us a sense of what seeds were planted in your mind that you then were able to follow up on?
So I was very close to my grandparents, and funnily, they spoke so much about the happy times until partition.
Yeah.
And then post partition, they would speak again about, memories from childhood, memories. Funnily, I think they had, like you said, they had blanked out just that period itself. And it's not only true of them. We've done so many now for my research. I've done so many partition interviews that I've listened to, the oral histories, the Citizens Archive of Pakistan. Stanford University has their partition archives, partition museum. I mean, it is, like you said, I think, one person said, it's taken me a lifetime to forget. Why
Yeah.
would I go back and remember?
Yeah.
So they just blanked that out. And the only one time that there was a hint of it was, and I mentioned this in my author's note in Across the Line, is when my grandfather was reading to me a story from Manto one summer vacation. And he broke down and he cried. And I was 10 or 11. And I remember going and calling my dadi, and I didn't know what to do. I was just so uncomfortable. He was this, tall, strapping man who'd always been, freedom fighter, gone to jail with Nehru and Gandhi. And I had never seen him not be in control. And here he was sobbing like a child. And my dadi just told him, Chaddo mitti pao, like let it go, bury it. And I left the room. And I remember later that evening coming and hiding that book. It was Toba Tek Singh's story that he was reading to me. And I remember hiding that book and never wanting, even by mistake, to take it out and ask my grandfather to read from it because I didn't
Mhm.
want to see him cry. But
Oh.
what I still regret, and why I call it the unfinished conversation, is I never asked him, why did you cry that day? I never did. I was just, I was blocking it out. Like they were blocking it out. I was also just uncomfortable.
But you
And
were just a child.
I was a child, but I, I never, ever, I never even told my parents. I never asked them. It
Yeah.
was almost like, like a child, you sense where who is comfortable talking about what, and as a child you pick it up.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I think I kind of must have sensed that.
I want to ask you about your children and how all of this has affected them, because obviously this is their lineage, and they're hearing about it from, I suppose, with a safer distance, because they're not hearing it directly from the people who were part of it, but yet knowing that it was their, great grandparents. What's their response been?
The beautiful thing, Rohini, is that when the film released, I'm talking about the film now because it's more recent. And Vivek, my husband, was here with our daughters. I was in India for the film release. And they went with a whole lot of, I think some of the IM women also went that day. And my daughter's school friends who come from, Britain, Pakistan, Japan, China, Ukraine, Turkey, all over, right? India, of course, and their parents. And it was a whole very mixed, very international audience that went to watch the film. And they called me to say everybody connected on some level. And that I feel is because everybody has felt loss of some kind.
Yes.
You may not have gone through the partition, but look at the kind of strife that has happened all over the world. And we are all carrying, I think, we are all carrying genetic memory of trauma. And
Yeah.
that's why that scene with Pali Dada in the film where they ask him कि हमें समझ नहीं आया, एंड ही सेज आप कैसे समझेंगे, मैं बताऊंगा भी तो आप देखेंगे नफरत एक कौम की दूसरे कौम के लिए, पर वो नहीं था. And I think strikingly what stayed with me through my life, having spoken to my grandparents and millions of other, not millions, but how many ever other interviews I've watched, is that the lack of rancor against the other, because
Yes.
they had seen firsthand that the victims were in turn the aggressors, and it
Yeah.
was all orchestrated
Yeah.
from, the whatever the attackers, as you may, came from outside. And I saw that firsthand when Indira Gandhi died. I saw how, I was in Delhi for college at that time, and I saw, or maybe it was high school, it was my sixth form, I was in Delhi, and I saw how these mobs came from outside. These were not people we knew, they were paid to come and kill and ransack. And that's happened in so many places around the world. So I think it's important for youngsters today to realize there is another narrative. because we are fed one narrative in the
Yes.
news. It's important because we lose these stories from a generation that has seen it and yet holds no rancor. But there is rancor among people who have no reason to, it's just being fed for other reasons.
Yes. And what's the response to the film been from people in Pakistan? Because obviously it
I can't
equally,
tell you, Rohini. And
yeah,
that was just so heartwarming.
yeah,
So heartwarming. I mean, I've got so many Pakistani friends here in Dubai, back in Pakistan. They're all the ones in Pakistan haven't watched it yet. They're really waiting. But such beautiful messages I've received from friends here who have taken their parents. And one friend said, her elderly father, he was just sitting there quiet because there's so many things that go through your head. And she
yeah.
said, I was angry at my husband because I felt like he had walked out towards the end, but he was standing at the back and sobbing.
Oh,
So it's like it's talking to people at a very, I think, just human level. And
yes,
that's, for me, that's, I think, what I hoped it would do.
yes. And I think the thing about it is that it's almost a film I can imagine that you get something more the next time you watch it. Like you watch it the first time and there's because it's not a film that's kind of like it's fast paced in some ways, but there's so much there that you kind of need your body, your mind needs time to absorb it to really make sense of it before you can move on to the next thing. So that's why I can see why the momentum in the film has picked up. Like, so someone who's watched it once might say to a friend, "Oh, have you seen this? Okay, I'm happy to come with you if you haven't seen it." So you go and watch it the second time and maybe the third time. And I'm looking forward to watching it on Netflix because here obviously it wasn't running for very long. Um, yeah, I mean, well done, I think, to all of the team. The music is beautiful. I think the two actors who play the young protagonists were just sublime. There was just such innocence to them, which was just so endearing. I absolutely loved it. I want to bring it back to you, and you talked about your purpose and that conversation that you had in that taxi or that car with Imtiaz Ali about your purpose. So tell me how you're feeling about that now.
So I think, my grandmother used to say something called Chardi Kala. And Chardi Kala is Punjabi for, I guess, a very rough translation could be like Maya Angelou says, and yet I rise. So no matter what, yet I rise.
Yeah.
Throw life, throw what you will at me, I will still stand back up. And that is something that I feel I needed to learn, and I have learned, I think, to the best of my ability. And of course, there are days where everything seems like, oh no, what's going on? But I think I have found a stillness and um, a purpose in that stillness. And I return to it. And I can block out a lot of the noise. And I come back to some very quiet reflections about what we are here to do and how best we spend the rest of our days. And I have been thinking about this a lot. I think it was since COVID,
Yeah.
but really choosing um, interactions, choosing what I put my energy towards more mindfully. And my mom has also, she's been on a spiritual path for really long. um, I think I'm more perhaps on that path now.
So this is not the start of a career in screenplay for Bollywood. Oh, it could be, I suppose. I mean, it feels to me that you're someone who's like just happy to go with the flow. And if something comes up that interests you, you'll say yes. And if not, you'll keep
Yeah,
moving.
it's so funny because on the one hand, I'm writing these really like things that, like my mom says, it's even bad to think about things like this that you're writing. So on the one hand, I'm writing these really bad things, like in the new film I'm writing. And on the other hand, I'm on this other path. But it's what you do with, it's the gaze, right? So you could be in a very dark space, but then what do you do with that? What's the purpose of this writing? So you
Yes.
could go into a really dark zone to tell a
Yeah.
story, but as long as finally there is redemption. You know what I'm trying to say? So
Yes.
sometimes you're grappling with a lot of things, and so
Yeah.
I'm doing a courtroom drama. I've started work on my next few films. So you're exploring a very dark side of human nature sometimes. Um, and one aspect of spirituality is just surround yourself with good thoughts, good intentions. But here I am exploring the worst. If you look at my, like, what I research, it's like horrible. But it's a journey, and sometimes you know what you don't want to do also.
But it's also life, isn't it? And I think the somebody said this, and it sort of really stayed with me that if it wasn't for Judas, there would be no Jesus.
Exactly.
So I think we need, and someone else also said, because I, like you, I'm also sort of going down a path where um it's very interesting to me how if you think about why we're on this earth, why did we choose this particular lifetime? What was the soul, what was our soul planning? That some souls come in choosing to be villains, right? So it's like a play, not everyone gets to be the good guy. Sometimes you got to be the bad guy. And so when you think about humanity in that way, suddenly it lifts something, it lifts a certain amount of judgment about
Hmm.
why things are the way they are. Because if you don't have that darkness, maybe you wouldn't appreciate the light. Anyway, so I don't know why I've gone down this path. But I guess what I'm saying is that I agree with you sometimes, but even the darkness can be explored in a way that's very um gentle, if that's the
Mm.
right word, you know? And I love stories that kind of don't gloss over the darkness, but not necessarily it being in your face, but just giving you enough of a hint so you can just leave the rest to your imagination and you just know it's
Yes.
really dark. So, for example, sorry, I just want to say in that film, Main Vaapas Aaunga, there, what I liked about it is that a lot of the violence was implied, and there
Yes.
wasn't, apart from one scene,
Yes.
where it
Yes.
was pretty stark. And but other than that, it wasn't blood and gore. It was a lot of it was things we knew and things that were kind of implied. And I think that's a really clever way to do it without putting people off with too much. So
Yes.
so
And
yes,
we didn't
I
want to
enjoy
not
it.
do it at all, because it, at one level, is a cautionary tale about where divisive politics takes us. So
Yes,
you can't have it too, you can't whitewash it. So we wanted to tell the story authentically, and even now we've scratched the surface, because even Imtiaz doesn't like showing violence. He's not that person. So it would have sold more, but he's just not that person. So we've shown, like you said, a lot
yeah,
of it was just left, but in real life what happened was so much worse, so much
yeah.
worse.
Oh, of course, I can imagine. And just a kind of slightly off the wall question, I when we have sort of trauma that is ancestral, like it was with your grandparents' generation and many, many people of their generation, I'm curious to know what you did by bringing it to light and releasing it. Do you feel like you've released some of that ancestral trauma from your lineage? Do you feel lighter having done this?
When I went to watch the rough cut of the film, which is maybe 3 months, 2 months ago, before it. So I had gone for the shoot, and I would see little bits of it, but I hadn't ever seen it after Rahman had put the music and everything. So when I was in India, I requested if I could, and Imtiaz invited me to see the rough cut because he wanted my feedback also. And I was sitting alone, I remember. I had meetings in the morning with various studios, etc. And then after all those meetings had gone, and there was nobody in the office. Just Imtiaz's AD put the thing on for me, and it was just me sitting in the room alone. And Rohini, I can't tell you, when that film finished and after Diljit's song at the end, I was just sitting in the room and I felt the presence of my grandparents.
Oh,
It was almost like they were there with me.
yes.
And I felt like they were there and we had finished our conversation. We had completed whatever was left unsaid. So I don't know if that makes sense. It may sound really strange.
No,
But
no, it makes sense
I
to me.
felt it. I felt them there,
Yes.
you know, and I kept quiet about it. But then I started listening to a lot of reels where people were watching the film and saying something similar. And I was like, okay, I'm not the only crazy one here. People are actually saying, just what I felt.
Yes. Yeah.
And yeah,
And do you think that this film in particular, is going to help bring the two countries together? Because there's so much, there's still so much animosity on a political level, even if not on a sort of a on the ground human level. What do you think?
I hope so. I mean, I always hope for art to bridge borders.
Mm,
Putting it together was, again, Nadia Jamil, who's a Pakistani actor who I met during did I say this already? The,
no.
the Lahore Literature Festival. I was invited to talk about Across the Line.
Yes.
And COVID happened. So then it couldn't happen in person, but we met online. And again, this was during COVID. So a lot of stuff happened during COVID. And
Yeah.
Nadia read the book and she loved it so much. And she's from Lahore. And she said, you know what? In your book, we have piecing it together. If you remember Across the Line, there's Jay and Inaya start piecing it together. So she said, let's do it in real life. You're Indian, I'm Pakistani. Let's do it in real life. And that's how piecing it together took birth. I
Yes.
did this little Facebook thing. None of us are technically savvy, but we just did this little Facebook page. And suddenly, overnight, there were people from all over the world writing in saying, can you connect me to my friend so and so in Pakistan? Or my house is here in India. Can you go and send me photographs? And thanks to all of that, somebody, a young journalist, connected me with the people who are living in my family's ancestral house in Rawalpindi. And another lady, Bela Jamil, she is elderly. She took the trouble to go and take pictures of a temple that my family had built in
Right.
Rawalpindi, and she sent me all these pictures, and it's now used as a school for blind children. Who does this in the
Amazing.
middle of COVID? She got into a car and she drove from Lahore to Rawalpindi to take those photographs for me. So it's literally like, on a human level, we're so close. In fact, Nadia Jamil gave me the chand balis that you saw in the film. So she bought these beautiful chand balis from Lahore, from a designer called Amber Sami, who's supposed to be really, really, sort of sought after. And I had never owned such beautiful chand balis in my life. And then I went to Oxford to drop one of my children, I think, and I dropped my chand bali there and I lost it, one of them.
Oh,
And I was so sad about it because I had never owned something so gorgeous. And I didn't even know how to tell Nadia that I'd lost it. So I was writing to another friend of mine who was from Karachi, saying, can you ask Amber Sami if she can make me one more, because I've lost it. I don't want to tell Nadia I've lost it. And then I got another pair which didn't look like that. But at the back of my mind, when I was writing the script, it was like, uski chand bali kho gayi. And
so
then that
that's the
became a
film, isn't it?
metaphor
Yeah.
for loss,
Yeah.
for meeting again. For, of course, it took on a different meaning in the film, when Imtiaz said, let's use it like this also. But yeah, so it's on a one-to-one human level, there is no difference. Nadia's family has done the exact reverse migration of my family. So
What I think the message I'm taking away is that we shouldn't read too much into what the news talk about, because they're only ever going to talk about the negatives. But on a human level, there is so much potential for reconciliation and for just that human connection. to a
Yeah,
craft you want to
and
do. Did you
that's
ever go back to Sargoda? Did you get a chance to go there or not?
I was late. I didn't get my visa in time when the research team for the film was going, but they went and they stayed with my uncle who still lives in Sargodha. So they took photographs and everything, and
Yeah,
then they came back and it was all recreated in Punjab, the Indian Punjab.
yeah.
So yeah, but I hope to go. I hope to go now.
Before we finish, Nanika, could you maybe talk through about what you would consider as a fulfilled life? Because everyone's got their own definition of what a fulfilled life looks like for them, and yours has been a very interesting life, and I'm sure there's much more still to come from you. But where you're sitting now, what would you say your definition is of a fulfilled life?
It's a very profound question. I think I always want to give more than I take. So whichever life I touch, I think I always want to leave someone with more than I take from them. And I hope that, in whatever small or big way, I can do that. So I think that would be a fulfilled life for me. I don't know if it needs to be very big things, but even in small interactions, it could be a smile, it could be a just making someone's day a little better than it was before.
Yeah,
So yeah, I think that would be a fulfilled life. And everybody comes with their own baggage. Everyone's going through a journey. Just kindness, just being kinder to everyone you meet along the way.
yeah,
And everybody may not reciprocate that because maybe they're not able to. But
yes.
just go anyway.
I
Just
love that. I love.
yeah.
And if you were to give any sort of advice, and I know we're not huge on giving advice, but given, what you've gone through and what you've learned, if someone was thinking, I would love to sort of tap into my creative side and do something a bit different to what I'm doing now, what would you say, in terms of what you've learned and what you would share with somebody in terms of advice?
So don't be afraid of failure. I think that's important because a lot of times we're held back because we're scared we'll fail. It's one life, it's short. Don't be scared. Just do what you need to. Try new things. Keep learning. I've in every decade I've done something different. I'm always, like I said, the oldest person. I was first a corporate banker, then an investment banker, then a novelist, now a screenwriter. At each time I have to unlearn and learn.
Yes,
But the thing is that you are always somehow using something from before, so nothing is wasted. It's all just a journey. And also, if it seems too hard, just remember Chardi Kala. I'm planning to get a tattoo, Chardi Kala. Nothing is too hard. It's just the next day is hopefully going to be there. So just try and do it better than the last. And that's it, just one foot after another.
that's beautiful advice. So just for the people who don't know, and that probably includes me, what is Charti Kala? What does that mean?
So the same thing. So like, and yet I rise.
And yet I rise.
Yes. I
Yes,
think I know, I'm not sure if I'm saying it, the Maya Angelou poem, was it? And still I rise?
still I rise.
And
Yeah,
still I rise. Yeah.
yeah, yes. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Nanika. And I wish you all the best. And I look out for your new movies and projects coming out. But in the meantime, I hope this film continues to spark conversations and remind us that even if it's not partition, there's other kinds of things that have divided us, and that there's always room for us to have a conversation and reconciliation.
Thank you so much, Rohini. I really enjoyed this, and I hope a lot of people can watch the film. It's in cinemas still. It's been 6 weeks. It's still in cinemas, but it will be on Netflix, I think in early August,
Very
and
well.
would love for everybody to watch it.
Amazing. Thank you so very much.